Welcome to Washington in Focus Daily. It is Wednesday, August 19th, 2026. I'm Carlene Johnson, the Center Square, Washington state government reporter. And in today's episode, an update on a case that we've talked about in recent months concerning a Puyallup High School student, a wrestler who was allegedly sexually assaulted during a match back in December. She went to the mat against an opponent who turned out to be a biological male. She didn't know that he was at the time, and then alleges she was sexually assaulted during that match. And the real issue then became the fact that the school, her school, Rogers High School in Puyallup, failed to report that. Of course, they are mandatory reporters, but they did not. There are some charges involved, but the case was argued yesterday in U.S. District Court in Tacoma. So we're going to bring you the very latest in that very closely watched case. Then another case involving Alliance Defending Freedom as well on concerns that a Washington state counselor raised years ago. There's a 2018 law here in Washington state, basically, that doesn't allow a counselor to talk with a minor who comes in, maybe experiencing some gender dysphoria, questions about their sexuality. Well, in Washington state, counselors, even behind closed doors in a private session, are only allowed to affirm gender transition, not allowed to counsel anything other than that. If you weren't aware, it's still a law here in Washington, but there's been a U.S. Supreme Court decision out of Colorado that now has new implications for this case and a gentleman by the name of Brian Tingley. So we'll bring you the latest. And then finally, new poll results out from Change Washington that don't show a lot of support for embattled Seattle Mayor Katie Wilson. You recall there's a recall that has been filed, not yet certain whether or not that's going to move forward. But this new poll result shows pretty widespread dissatisfaction with Mayor Katie Wilson when she's just months into her first year in office. We'll share that in today's episode. All right, let's jump into this. A Puyallup-area high school wrestler who says that she was sexually assaulted during a match against an opponent back in December had her case heard in U.S. District Court in Tacoma yesterday. The student, Callie Killer, and her mother, Stephanie, are suing the school district. They're also suing the Washington Interscholastic Activities Association, the WIAA, and others for violating Title IX. And her attorneys, again, were back in court yesterday seeking an injunction in a lawsuit that challenges these policies that still to this day allow transgender athletes to compete, biological males to compete against biological females. So I spoke with one of Callie Keeler's attorneys yesterday, just after those arguments concluded in Tacoma. This is Alliance Defending Freedom Senior Counsel, Hal Frampton.
Callie Keeler is a high school wrestler. She was 15 years old at the time of the incident. She's been wrestling since she was 4 years old. Last December at a high school wrestling match, she was put on the mat against a biological male without any notice to her or her mother. She would not have taken the mat if she had known that it was a male that she was going to be wrestling against. And during the match, the unthinkable happened. She was sexually assaulted. She tried to cry out. She tried to get her mother's attention. She sort of gave up, rolled over, and let herself be pinned. After the match, she and her mother reported the incident, and unfortunately, the school did nothing. They just sat on it for days and days and days and days and days. It wasn't until the media started reporting on the incident that the school finally opened an investigation, which is still ongoing and is still deeply insufficient. So what we were asking for today was, number one, that Callie be removed from that school environment because she can't wrestle under these coaches who ignored her complaints, under a principal and an administration that ignored her. Second, that her mother be given notice and the right to opt out before she's placed on the mat against a male again, which we think is eminently reasonable and required by her mother's fundamental parental rights. And then third, that under Title IX, which exists to protect equal athletic opportunity for women, that she not be required to wrestle against a male athlete. So those are sort of the three things that we put in front of the court today. They're the three main things that are at issue in the case, and we are hopeful that the court will restore the original meaning and purpose of Title IX.
Now, you may recall after the alleged sexual assault, Pierce County Sheriff's Department investigated and recommended charges to the prosecutor, but then prosecutors declined to actually move the case forward, basically saying that the accused athlete, there was no way they didn't believe that they could prove beyond a reasonable doubt that it was an intentional sexual assault. Now, the Rogers High School principal and the athletic director are both in some trouble, and the principal's no longer at that school, but they're facing charges for failing to report because right after this happened in December, Kelly and her mom went to the school, reported what happened, and rather than turn that over to police, which they're required by law to do, they kind of decided to investigate internally. And that's a big no no. You can't do that. When we initially reported on this story back in February, after it was broken by Undivided podcaster Brandy Cruz, the Puyallup School District provided a short statement for us, came from their district spokesperson, Sarah Gillespie, who, declined comment on the specifics in response to my inquiry, but sent this matter is under investigation. As such, we cannot share details or discuss specifics. What we can say is that student safety is a top priority and that all reports involving student safety are taken seriously. Now, with Callie hoping to transfer, as you heard her attorney say, to Puyallup High School and get away from Rogers, she still wants to wrestle, but she wants the assurance that she won't have to wrestle against a biological male. And right now, WIAA rules don't even allow that information to be shared with athletes. Representative Michael Keaton is a Republican from Puyallup, where Callie is a student. And I spoke with him about the case earlier this month, just a couple of days after he met with the district's new superintendent, who I'm trying to secure an interview with. So hopefully that will happen in the coming days. But this is what Representative Keaton shared about the case.
I met with the new superintendent. I decided to wait until he actually took official position, which was on August 1st. The new superintendent is really focused on doing these issues, cleaning up and putting what's the district first and the people first and the students first and the staff. He's really bringing a common sense approach to the job. And our meeting was only supposed to be 30 minutes. We ended up talking for over an hour and 20. And I'm really, really happy and excited for Puyallup School District and who they have coming in. Um, as far as the issue that popped up with the female wrestler, and it was between Rogers and Emerald Ridge High School during a meet out there. There was some initial reporting done by the coach. The problem is that reporting went to the staff, uh, but it did not get over to the police for like I think it was almost 2 months, and you can't do that. You know, they're all mandatory reporters. If there's an issue, it needs to be reported. The school resource officers, who we have some awesome ones, they didn't even know about it, and nobody could do anything about it. And now it looks like there's some charges that are going to be filed against the director for the school for sports, and then also with the principal. I've heard that the principal is already forced to resign, and I'm just happy that there's finally some accountability here. I hate to see good people go through bad things because they made a mistake, but this is a mistake you can't make. You have to report these things. That's the whole purpose. It's about establishing trust. It's the same thing with the initiative that we have out here. Parents need to know when something happens to their kid. They're the first ones going to help them out, and if they don't know about it, they're not going to get the help they need.
Now, the U.S. Department of Education is also investigating how the Puyallup School District handled this matter. And after Brandy Cruz broke that story, and then we here at the Center Square put up an article the very next day, there was plenty of attention paid by the U.S. Department of Education to this. And there was a post put out by Education Secretary Linda McMahon on X and basically said, the Trump administration isn't going to tolerate this. Because remember, we here in Washington state have not adopted the rules, the directive of President Trump. Obviously, we have our initiative that's going to be on the November ballot, ultimately decided by voters. But in the meantime, we're still out of compliance with federal rules, though our state superintendent and other state electeds, including Governor Ferguson and Nick Brown, say they don't have to comply with that they're following state law, and that's been their order for the 295 public school districts across Washington state. So again, the ADF attorney here told me that the arguments in court yesterday seemed very fair. He said the judge seemed to understand that there's a need to kind of move things along with the next school year about to start here in a matter of just a few weeks. So here again is the ADF attorney for Callie Keeler.
It's hard to even have to say this, but it should not be the price of admission to school sports that girls have to give up fairness and safety. The only way you can play sports in Washington state is to say, I'm okay being unsafe by being on a field or on a wrestling match or on a basketball court with a male. I'm okay with it not being fair. I'm okay with whatever might happen in the course of that event. That's simply absurd. It should not be the price of admission for girls to compete in school sports. Not to mention the abuse that she suffered since standing up for women and girls and speaking out about this, and just the ugly things that have been said to her at school and elsewhere.
Now, I did reach out to the Puyallup School District today. They did not respond. I also reached out to the WIAA directly and to the private attorney that's been representing them in Title IX disputes. I did get a response back from both of them on the WIAA side, basically to say that because there's ongoing litigation, they would decline comment at this point. So unfortunately, I was not able to include their perspective in this beyond just the very limited statement that I got from the school district back in February. All right, moving on. Washington state law prohibits licensed counselors from discussing certain topics related to gender identity and sexuality with their minor clients, even when they're pursuing goals that their clients might have come in with and set for themselves. You could have a 14-year-old who is experiencing some gender confusion or concerns about same sex attraction. Those sorts of things could be discussed. The family could be, faith based and seek out a Christian counselor, as often happens. And yet, in the state of Washington, even if that child comes in and says, I'm confused. I don't feel like I'm in the right body, but I don't want to begin a gender transformation. Well, in this state, that counselor is not allowed to counsel that minor child in that direction. They can only, in the state of Washington, embrace the gender ideology toward changing one's gender. It's been a law here in the state of Washington since 2018. But Brian Tingley, a Christian marriage and family counselor, challenged the law as a violation of his First Amendment free speech protections. Now, federal courts dismissed his case. Alliance Defending Freedom took it on in 2021. It was denied by the federal courts, and then the U.S. Supreme Court declined to take his case in 2023. But we fast forward to March of this year, and the Supreme Court ruled 8-1 in favor of a very similar case out of the state of Colorado, with a counselor challenging that state's law over this very same thing. And again, this is the Childs v. Salazar case. 8-1, Supreme Court ruled in favor of the counselor, condemning the viewpoint of discrimination of this law in Colorado. And that paved the way for Brian Tingley to be able to reopen his case. And that's where they're at now. So here is Alliance Defending Freedom attorney on this case, Johannes Vidmalm Delphonse. They represent Brian Tingley.
Absolutely. Well, Washington state law, it really boils down to government enforced viewpoint censorship. Counselors are allowed to help a client transition. They're allowed to support a client who wants to engage in a gender transition, but they're not allowed to help a minor client who wants to achieve comfort with their biological sex. Literature is clear that most children and likely most adolescents who go through this, the gender dysphoria will naturally resolve itself if they're left alone and if they're not pushed into an identity that is inconsistent with their biological sex. But Washington mandates one view, the so-called affirming view, and prohibits the religiously informed or the scientifically informed view that it's better for these children and young people to grow comfortable with their biological sex instead of rejecting it.
So, again, in light of the Colorado U.S. Supreme Court ruling, Brian asked the federal court here in Washington to reopen his case so that he can freely counsel minor clients who might be struggling with gender confusion. And the court decided last month in July, okay, based on the U.S. Supreme Court ruling out of Colorado and this other matter that's very similar to Brian Tingley's case, they've agreed to reopen. And so there's no timeline yet when arguments might take place again or the legal course forward on this. But it's a big win at this point for Mr. Tingley and ADF because right now he's been told he can go back and operate like he did before and counsel his clients as he was before the 2018 law change.
Well, Washington, they did just agree to a preliminary injunction that would protect Brian Tingley during the pendency of this case. So we think that's huge. I mean, as of right now, Brian Tingley is free to speak consistent with his beliefs and his clients' beliefs on these topics for the first time in 5 years. And in terms of when the case will resolve, that remains to be seen. I mean, we hope that Washington will do the right thing and agree to no longer enforce these problematic provisions of its law, allow counselors to help clients with their own self-determined goals, and respect the Constitution. But that remains to be seen.
Again, no timeline as yet for this case to go back to federal court, given the Colorado U.S. Supreme Court decision now in the mix. But we're going to be following this very, very closely. Okay, now a new poll is out from Change Washington asking people what they think about Seattle Mayor Katie Wilson, her job performance. And it seems to indicate there may be some growing dissatisfaction just months into her first year in office, with 2/3 of voters disapproving of her job performance and 6 in 10 people saying she should resign or be removed from office. Now, you remember she's facing a new recall challenge that right now, whether or not that's going to move forward, we don't know. It's a pretty high bar to, you have to prove that she committed malfeasance or misfeasance, violated her oath of office for that to move forward. And then they would have to get like 70,000 some signatures of people saying they support a recall. And then it would go to the ballot ultimately. So there's quite a process still to play out. But this poll suggests that there may be an appetite for this moving forward, should it get to the point of collecting signatures for a recall. So we'll put up some of the results here from Change Washington. This was conducted very recently, August 13 through 17, finding just 22% of Seattle voters approving of Mayor Wilson's job performance, 66% disapproval, and then 12% said they weren't sure. This is interesting. Among Seattle Democrats, obviously, who put her in office, 60% disapprove of Wilson's performance, 28% approve. Among independents, 79% disapproving and 8% approving. And overall, 60% saying Wilson should resign or be removed from office. Interesting that among independents, the result was more striking that 76% said Wilson should resign or be removed, with only 13% disagreeing. So it is important to know there was another survey that came out from Fulcrum Strategy Group last week. And in that survey, they found 2/3 of Seattle voters not confident she's got an effective plan to improve public safety. So this was kind of a different type of poll. That survey was 500 Seattle voters, which was done just a few days before the Change Washington poll from August 10 through the 13th. 9% of voters in that survey said they were confident, and 25% somewhat confident that Wilson has an effective public safety plan. So that poll a little different, focusing on really public safety. Of course, she's been under a great amount of scrutiny since the bite of Seattle shooting, and then ultimately forcing the police chief to resign, giving him a big fat golden parachute on the way out the door. So a lot of pressure on her. Interesting poll results out today from Change Washington. And that's it for today's episode of Washington in Focus Daily. Quick tease on a story we're going to be putting up tomorrow, because there's a new public disclosure complaint that has been filed by KVI radio talk show host Ari Hoffman, alleging that the Seattle Times and some of their contributors, some of those donations were not reported ahead of the 2024 election for the Initiative 2117 that asked voters, do you want to repeal the Climate Commitment Act? Ultimately, voters chose not to do so, and that is still in place. And that's a large reason why our gas prices are among the very highest in the nation. But it's a very intense complaint, some public records that Ari Hoffman obtained, and we're going to be writing that up and talking about that in tomorrow's episode for certain. So now that's a wrap on today's episode of Washington in Focus Daily for this Wednesday. Hope you can get outside and enjoy the beautiful sunshine, and I hope you'll join us again on Thursday.